Hello, my friends. Broadcasting from Studio A at Proven Winners Color Choice Shrubs, it's the Gardening Simplified Show with Stacy Hervella, me, Rick Weist, and our engineer and producer, Adriana Robinson. Well, you know, I think annuals, flowering annuals, to me, aren't an investment like a tree. They're more of an opportunity. They're an event. Investment is traditionally defined as the commitment of resources to achieve later benefits, and the key word here is later. See, with flowering annuals, we can fill gaps in our landscape, have instant impact, season-long color. Many annuals are edibles. Of course, pollinators love them. It's a great way to teach kids, and shopping for them is an adventure in spring. Just ask Stacy and her mom.
Indeed. It's one of my favorite things that I do all year long. You know, I think of annuals. It's interesting that you bring up the investment thing. I don't know exactly how to classify them, but they're akin to a party. Yeah. You know, like going all out with decorations and food. And yeah, sure, it's kind of like a condensed, short-term payoff, but it's so worth it.
It is.
You have to take advantage of the summer while you can. And yeah, shopping for annuals, I think, is honestly one of the most fun things. It's even more fun if you can do it with someone like your mom or someone that you really love. But it's a delight. I love it.
Yeah, I love it too. And I agree, an event or an opportunity. And then if you think about it, you know, it used to be we had Decoration Day and, of course, Mother's Day. We can thank Anna Jarvis and Woodrow Wilson. Years ago, they designated the second Sunday in May to be Mother's Day. And then, of course, we had Decoration Day, which became Memorial Day, which became the fourth Monday in the month of May. So you take those holidays and you throw into the mix that it's the last projected frost date for many people in the United States. Throw all those three together and wow, it becomes a flower festival.
Yes, a very, condensed, like 4-week flower festival. But yeah, what a great time it is.
It is a fantastic
You're killing me over here. It's so far away.
I know. Well, from the perspective of the garden center industry, we used to, years ago, when I first started out in the industry, we would sell annuals big time during the month of May and June. Now I'm finding it is an April to October thing. The party goes on for the entire spring, summer, and fall period, and that's what makes annuals so great. All right, the envelope, please. 2025 National Annual of the Year is Supertunia Mini Vista Yellow Petunia. What cheerful blooms, and I have to say, they must have consulted with Stacy on this one because, Stacy, I know how much you love yellow in your landscape.
I do love yellow, and I think it is an interesting choice for the Annual of the Year because I think very few people, when they think of petunias, yellow is probably not even remotely part of their mental image, part of the conversation. People don't really think of yellow petunias at all. But I have actually grown, I haven't grown this particular one, but I did grow the Supertunia Saffron Finch petunia. And
beauty.
Yeah, just beautiful. And I think it's high time that people start thinking of petunias as an opportunity for yellow. They're not like a namby-pamby yellow. Well, not that there's anything wrong with that. They're like a good, bold, beautiful yellow, and I love it.
They are sunshine. And of course, I love the Mini Vista series of Supertunias. They bloom their heads off. They can handle the heat. Last year, I took some Mini Vistas that were in hanging baskets, just overflowing the hanging baskets. I popped the hanging baskets off and plunged them into the ground. They were fantastic.
Yeah, they are one that you can grow in the ground. A lot of people get confused sort of about what the difference between Supertunias and Super Bells are. One is a petunia, one is a Calibrachoa. Super Bells is a Calibrachoa. But the Calibrachoas, they don't recommend putting in the ground because they need such good drainage. They are made for containers. Whereas the Supertunias, put them in the ground. Make them into a flower-filled ground cover and party it up.
The wonderful thing about Mini Vista Supertunias, or in this case, the plant of the year, the flowering annual plant of the year, is the fact that they're self-cleaning. Really no maintenance involved.
So you don't have to worry. I mean, this is one of those things that I think people who grew petunias back in the day are just like, oh, I'm not growing petunias. You have to deadhead them.
Exactly.
It's smelly. It's sticky. It's horrible. I'm
it's
never
awful.
growing petunias again. But, you know, honestly, and I don't even say that because I work here, but Proven Winners really did change all of that with the Super Petunias. It's a whole new way to look at petunias. And if you have been holding back from growing petunias for those reasons, you have those, you know, bad memories, it's high time that you rethink it and bring some petunias into your annual plantings.
It's Flower Power Super Petunia Mini Vista Yellow Petunias. The Caladium of the year, envelope please, Heart to Heart Blushing Bride. And Stacy, for Caladiums, I love the fact that many Caladiums now are both sun and shade. They're not just relegated to the shade. In this case, a strap leaf Caladium with elongated foliage, and it's ruffled also, and so you see these bright pink leaves edged in a bright green border with patches of white. Can handle sun or shade, although if you're growing them in the south, probably better off in shade, but here in the Midwest or North, sun or shade. Just love Caladiums and the fact that they're so heat and humidity tolerant.
You know, caladiums are another great example of a plant that has come so far from where it was. Now, I know you're going to remember this, but do you remember back in the day when you ordered caladiums, your choices were green, white, pink, or red? There was no variety.
Exactly.
There was no series.
Yep.
You had no idea what you're getting, just the color. And now it's just what has happened in the caladium breeding world. Between Heart to Heart and everything else out there, it's truly extraordinary. And I think it just really makes people rethink, again, this plant. And they do take sun, especially if you live in a colder climate. But I think especially for gardeners who have a lot of shade and want to have fabulous containers, this is a choice that should not be overlooked. You can stop thinking about, you know, feeling bad that you don't get flowers. Just pile on these caladiums. You'll have tons of color, tons of texture. They are absolutely beautiful. Now, I unfortunately am having a little pity party over here since we're talking about parties, because I have tried to grow Heart to Heart caladiums and the deer had other intentions.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, these are not very deer resistant. I've never had any trouble with them eating petunias. I don't think they like that, you know, kind of stickiness either. But yeah, I unfortunately they have actually climbed my front steps to get to the caladiums. So just a little word of warning for those of you who also have to deal with deer. But if you don't and you have shade and you're looking for something just fabulous and interesting, you can't really do much better than Heart to Heart caladiums.
Yeah, I agree. Coming up in segment 4, we're going to talk to Noah Derohanian. He is the Director of Product Management with Proven Winners. We're going to talk more about some of these fabulous varieties that are coming out this year, exciting varieties. And of course, Recipe of the Year also for flowering annuals this year. It's Ireland, Champagne Toast, and Vista View. Now, Stacy, I love the Recipe Ireland because to me, it looks like the flag of Ireland. You've got Goldilocks Rocks Bidens, you have Super Bells Over Easy Calabricoa, and then a favorite of many people, Luscious Basket Tangiglow Lantana. Now, you put all those together, that recipe almost looks like the flag of Ireland.
And it's a lot of color. Now, for our listeners who maybe aren't familiar with it, Proven Winners every year creates these different recipes of combinations of annuals. Now, for me personally, combining annuals is my favorite thing about growing annuals. But there's a lot of people who just want that ready-made, foolproof opportunity. And for them, I think that, you know, the recipes, whether it's the recipes of the year or just one of the many recipes on the website, it just makes a great starting point for designing your plants.
Yeah. These recipes and combinations, too, are not a recipe or a combination where someone's sitting at their desk thinking, oh, this would be cool. No, these are proven, tested, and tried, and so you know these recipes are going to work for you. Now, in addition to the annuals of the year, there are many new introductions this year. We're going to talk to Noah about it in segment 4. There's a Totally Tempted Kufia, which I'm very excited about. Aeromagica Purple Heliotrope. This one's fantastic because a lot of people have heliotrope melt out on them in the heat of summer, but this one is a fabulous cultivar, and so I recommend that. And then Stacy, I loved Scaevola before it was popular to love Scaevola, and now we have Star Diva. So as opposed to the hand or fan-shaped flowers that we're used to, we now have star-shaped flowers. So there are so many great new annuals coming down the line this year. I can't wait for frost-free days.
I know, me too. More color, a little less white, a little more color would not be a bad thing.
It's coming, folks. Hang on. We'll get there. Plants on Trial is next. Let's see how Stacy ties this all together here on the Gardening Simplified Show.
Greetings, gardening friends, and welcome back to the Gardening Simplified Show. We're talking the annual of the year. We've been through the shrub of the year. We've been through the perennial of the year, and now it is time for the annual of the year. And like we've said in previous shows, the plants of the year from the Proven Winners brand are selected by industry experts. Each of the partners that does perennials, shrubs, and annuals does it in a slightly different way. The way that we do it for shrubs is we have some of the biggest growers in the U.S. vote on that because, of course, the important thing and what's really great about the plants of the year is that they're going to be easy to find. And, you know, there's so many Proven Winners plants out there that a lot of times you'll fall in love with something and it can be hard to find. Yeah. And so the great thing about the annuals and perennials and shrubs of the year is that everybody's on board. They've known about this for a couple of years. You're only hearing about it right now, but the industry has known about it for a while. So the supply is going to be there for you to actually use and incorporate in your garden. And it's also just, I think, a nice guideline for trying new things every year.
Yeah, I love that.
You know?
And probably a little easier with annuals than it is, let's say, with perennials or shrubs. But that's why we see so many new introductions every year in annuals.
Right, and that's what we try to do is just to get people to focus on one thing because we do have so much great stuff. I mean, it's hard for me to focus on one plant every week for Plants on Trial because we do have so many great plants. So that's why I always try to tie it to whatever our theme of the episode is. And, you know, thinking about this week's, as you already said, Rick, I love yellow.
Yes, she does.
In the garden. And I have found that yellow in the garden for me is not necessarily something that I personally select. It's just something that has happened. And it's partly because I do grow, you know, a lot, not all, but mostly native plants and a great number of North American native flowering perennials and shrubs for that matter do happen to have yellow flowers. So by virtue of, you know, sort of a natural selection, I've ended up with quite a lot of yellow in my garden.
And I think when spring arrives to celebrate, we should do a show where we're both wearing yellow. I'll go out and find something yellow when the landscape changes.
All right, it's a deal.
Okay.
All right. So, and I do have a lot of yellow clothes too because I love yellow that much. I'm wearing yellow earrings right now. You just can't see them under the headphones. But the cool thing about yellow in the garden, as I was thinking about it, is that yellow is truly a seasonless color. I think a lot of other colors in the garden, you know, you think of them as just being very associated with a season. Like you aren't really seeing like a lot of red flowers or red stuff outside of summer and fall. And pink is highly associated with, you know, summer, and purple is highly associated with that sort of, at least in my garden, that late spring, early summer transitional period when you've got your Nepeta and your salvia and all of that stuff flowering. But yellow really is a seasonless color. In the spring, you've got your daffodils and your forsythia, of course. You know, summer, as we've just been through, all sorts of stuff. In fall, I mean, of course, so much yellow in fall, whether you're talking about a ginkgo or, you know, plants can...
My favorite yellow, ginkgo.
It's a great choice. And then on top of all those yellow flowers, there's also tons of yellow foliage.
Yes. As a matter of fact, I know where you're going with this segment. You're going to talk about spirea, right?
Spirea. I am not going to talk about spirea today. We do have yellow-leafed spirea, but I am talking about a plant that people aren't used to seeing with yellow foliage. Oh. The mystery thickens. And I won't keep you in suspense any longer. This week's plant on trial is Sky Dew Gold Blueberry.
What a gorgeous plant.
It is a very unique plant. So if you live in West Michigan, of course, blueberries are no stranger to you. You see them all the time. You kind of can't not see them if you're driving anywhere around here. But the home growing blueberries are different. You know, they're smaller, They're more garden friendly. They're not like the big, 6 feet tall plants that you'll see out in the actual blueberry farms. So Sky Dew Gold is a gold leaf ornamental blueberry. And through the show, you're going to hear me talk about it as an ornamental blueberry. And you might be thinking like, well, what exactly does that mean? Does that mean it doesn't have fruit? And the fact is it does set fruit, it does flower, and it does have fruit, and that fruit is edible. But this is a blueberry that was selected specifically for its looks in the garden or landscape.
And I can see why. When we were in the trial garden, Adriana, you and myself, I saw it in the distance, and Stacy, I was drawn towards it. Like, what is that?
Right. And I have had the same experience in our trial garden too, where, Adriana and I will be walking around going to make videos, and something will catch our eye and he'll be like, oh my gosh, what is that? And we'll go over there, and sure enough, it's a sky. It's happened to us more than once in different spots in the garden because it is just such a showy plant. So this is a gold leaf blueberry. And the foliage starts out kind of green in the spring with that kind of pinkish red flush that is common for blueberries. But then as that foliage expands and starts to mature, starts to, photosynthesize, it creates these bright golden pigments. And those are going to stay present on the foliage basically from, mid to late spring all the way until fall, when the plant then starts to turn red and yellow.
Okay.
And, the interesting thing to me about this plant, or one of the many things, is that it's a very vivid and very eye-catching gold yellow, but it's not unnatural looking.
What do you mean by that?
So, I think sometimes people want a really colorful landscape, and there's a lot of plants out there with colors that we're maybe not really used to seeing in nature where we live or whatever. And this has all of that pizzazz and eye-catching, dazzling kind of look, but not in a way that's like garish or gaudy.
Okay.
Like it's getting all your attention. It's really bright. It's very interesting and pretty in the landscape, but it doesn't feel out of place. Like it doesn't feel like you're trying to like scream. It's just like you're trying to, give a sassy wink.
I love sassy wink.
Something like that. So like I said, we call it an ornamental blueberry because it was selected, again, for these ornamental characteristics, not edible characteristics. And when you're going for a blueberry that you want to produce fruit, you're saying like, hey, does this produce early or late? Are the fruits large? Are they small? Are they juicy? Are they tasty? You're looking for the qualities of edibility. Now, this does produce fruit, and the fruits are perfectly delicious, but that was not our primary selection criteria. That's what makes it a little bit different than other blueberries. But if you already have blueberries, you can certainly add this for some pizzazz in your blueberry planting or in your landscape, and other blueberries will pollinate it, and you'll get fruit. So It's kind of like an added bonus. So for this plant, you should really think about the fruit, not as the main reason you're growing it, but kind of as a little added bonus there, if you want to have it or leave it to the animals or whatever you want to do with it.
Always a benefit. Now, do we need lots of sunshine and drainage for this like we do with blueberries here in Michigan?
Yes. So everything that you would normally need for properly siting a blueberry plant is going to be equally true for Sky Dew Gold.
Okay.
You're going to want acidic soil, of course. This is a non-negotiable. And a lot of people, I think, do think of blueberries as high-maintenance plants. And I'm going to get to pruning in just a second. But I think, as with everything in the garden, people tend to think of things as high maintenance when they are not sited properly and therefore need a lot of attention to do what you want them to do. But with Sky Dew Gold blueberry or any other kind of blueberry, if you plant it in full sun, and this is cold tolerant down to USDA zone 4, heat tolerant through USDA zone 8. So the warmer your climate, the more shade it can take. But if you're down there in zone 4 or 5, definitely going to want full sun for this, for the best color, best fall color, and of course, best flowering and fruiting if you do want some of those fruits. Acidic soil, well-drained soil, super crucial. Blueberries don't really like wet soil. They can take moist soil, but you don't want like the soggy soil. Exactly. That can lead to all sorts of issues for them. And the great thing, because this is an ornamental blueberry and not a production blueberry, you don't have to worry about pruning at all. Overall, if you're trying to grow blueberries for backyard fruit production, you do need to be quite careful with the pruning. You need to, remove the oldest growth, make sure that it has lots of young, healthy growth for the best flowering and fruiting. Timing is really crucial. It's a lot to remember, whereas with Sky Dew Gold, you don't have to prune it at all if you don't want to. In fact, it reaches just 2 to 4 feet tall and 3 to 4 feet wide. So it's really the perfect size for home landscaping. and you won't need to prune it, for any reason at all if you don't want to.
This sounds like the plant for me. No work, easy to grow.
And
I'm giving
showy.
you a sassy wink.
If you do want a sassy wink in your landscape, then yes, this would definitely be a good choice. So overall, blueberries are not the most deer resistant. They're not highest up on the list of plants that deer want to eat, but they will eat them, and they will particularly eat the young growth in spring, which is going to be where all those flowers are. It's going to be soft. They tend to eat it in spring because, of course, they're hungry. They've kind of exhausted the food supplies out in natural areas. So if you do have deer, I would definitely protect this plant with maybe a repellent or some netting, especially for its first couple of years. And then, you should be okay. Overall, people don't, like the blueberry growers around here, there's plenty of deer and they don't usually have to worry about them. So the woodier and more mature they get, the less appealing they are to deer, but it's something you're definitely going to want to protect for at least the first couple of seasons.
I'll bet on the positive side, the birds love them.
The birds absolutely love them. Yeah, and so do pollinators. I mean, because there's the blueberry flowers serve all sorts of different pollinators. So this is just one of those plants. It's a little bit different, kind of like a yellow petunia in that regard. And again, just a great way to bring color like nothing else to your garden and that great 3-season interest. So lots going for it. If you're interested, of course, you can see photos of it in our YouTube version or on Instagram or on our show notes at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com. You can also find a retailer to look for it this season and add it to your garden. We're going to take a little break. When we come back, we're opening up the garden mailbag, so please stay tuned. Greetings, gardening friends, and welcome back to the Gardening Simplified show. We are your headquarters for answering garden questions and apparently sassy winks. So I don't know where that came from, but it is new to the Gardening Simplified canon here. So anyway, one of the things that we really love to do to help simplify gardening for you is to answer your garden questions. Mm-hmm. And like I said before, even though it is kind of the off season, you're probably starting to think about things that are going wrong. And this week we actually have a couple of questions about houseplants as well.
All right.
Which is also something that we, even though it's not maybe technically gardening, it's gardening-like. So you can go to gardeningsimplifiedonair.com and ask us your questions there. But before we get to the questions, we do have a couple comments that I wanted to share. Listener Jackie, since today is the annual of the year show, she writes to us, I love, all capital letters, my Super Beena. So Super Beenas are a Proven Winners annual like Super Tunia, but they are verbena. Mm-hmm. Do you grow verbena?
Oh, yes, and I love it. And I'll tell you what, the Super Beenas, the fact that they are mildew resistant, because that was years ago, that was the big problem with verbena, was mildew. And they're vigorous and they're mildew resistant.
Well, that must be why Jackie loves them. She says, I'll always have it in my garden, and all the pollinators love it too. They're almost always filled with butterflies, and the hummingbird moths visit regularly. Hummingbird moths, who doesn't want hummingbird moths in their garden?
Love it.
They're the best. So she sends some pictures of her Super Beenas for some inspiration in the super line of improved Proven Winners annual. So do check us out on YouTube or at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com to take a look at those.
Stacy, we also got an interesting comment from listener Tom. Hardiness zone is great, but with the environmental changes occurring today, I feel a strong need for heat zone information on plants as well. I have had too many plants rated for my zone fail due to their intolerance to my heat conditions. I won't purchase a new plant without heat zone information or a recommendation. And Stacy, back in 1997, the American Horticultural Society created a hardiness zone for heat. And as I understand it, a heat day is over 86 degrees Fahrenheit or 30 degrees Celsius. So in zone 1, you would have no heat days. In zone 12, you could have as many as 210 or more heat days.
That's a lot of hot days.
That's a lot of hot days.
So the AHS system, heat zone system, is a great, or I should say was a great system. But unfortunately, they have pulled it from their website. And when I reached out to them to ask them why, because we were including AHS heat zone information on all of our tags and all of our websites and everything like that. So we were like, hey, we can't really send people to your website and say, here's your AHS, find your AHS heat zone when there's no map anymore. And they said, the data that we have was too out of date.
Okay.
We can't stand behind this system anymore because, of course, the more, everybody was freaking out a year ago about the USDA hardiness zone map and that being changed based on a better, more accurate data set. So they didn't have the funding or the data to continue supporting the heat zone system. And, what Tom is saying here, I think, is really so crucial to so many gardeners, whether you live in a hot climate or you live in a cold climate, because there's plenty of people who, especially in the center of the country, live in what would be considered a cold climate, but have extremely hot summers.
Yes.
And you really need a plant that can tolerate both of those things. So, Tom, I feel your pain, even though I don't live in a hot climate. I understand how valuable this information is to people. And, I totally understand that the hardiness zone system has a lot of shortcomings, particularly for people who live in hot climates. Unfortunately, at present, there is not really a better solution. I have a lot of people on our team here at Proven Winners Color Choice Shrubs looking for opportunities to fund research or to fund data so that we can continue to offer this service. So I wanted to add this just in case anybody's out there listening to the show and wants to get in touch. You can go to gardeningsimplifiedonair.com and let's see how we can work together to give the hot climate gardeners a little bit more reliable information to pick their plants.
Interesting. Yeah, that's fantastic. May asks, I have soil that was used in a pot for 2 years. Now the plant is gone. I want to know if I should keep reducing the soil for new plants. There's a lot of broken up roots, and in parts of the soil is a light brown color instead of a darker black. Should I just add organic matter to amend it? Not sure if the root bits are a problem. Oh, Stacy, the old potting soil and sticker shock when you go to a garden center and see exactly how expensive potting soil is. And I've got how many pots to fill? Right?
I feel you. Yeah. So as I think we've talked about on the show, I am a big, big believer in reusing your potting soil.
Agreed.
And particularly for houseplants, it can be a little bit easier than if you're dealing with the scale of outdoor containers. As I've said before, I just use those great big plastic storage bins that you get at Costco or whatever with the yellow tops. And two of those will store all of my soil that I use in my containers. I do mix it up with some nice compost to recharge it and get some organic matter back because, as May has noted, when that organic matter starts to go away, it's going to become more of just like, in peat moss is an organic matter as well. But a lot of the other more water retentive, high nutrition kind of stuff that they put in there, like leaf mold, there's all sorts of different things depending on the soil mix that you're buying. I would just mix that in by hand and reuse it. I don't worry about roots in my potting mix at all.
Same here. I mean, I pull out some of the bigger roots from year to year if we're talking about outside containers, but leaving some of the roots in, I view it as organic matter.
I do too.
Okay. All right.
And, a lot of people, when I've talked about this at, talks or whatever that I've given in various places, I've said well, don't you worry about disease or anything like that? And the answer to that is no, I actually don't worry about disease because most root diseases are actually going to be problematic in wet conditions.
Yes.
If the soil is well drained and it's not staying super wet, you really don't have very much to worry about. Now, of course, if you are an orchid grower or you're doing something that's really high value, that might be a different story. But I would say for the average home gardener, you have nothing to be concerned about. And if you are concerned, get rid of some of it. But yeah, I definitely believe in keeping your potting soil, treating it like a resource and an investment, and getting all the life you can out of it.
Yeah, I do the same. And here in Michigan, of course, we have an organic matter amendment called Dairy Doo, DOO, and I work a little bit of that into the old soil too. So I don't empty those pots, Stacy. I've got a green thumb from pinching pennies, I guess.
Little patina on there.
Oh boy, I'm trying to give you it's not a snarky wink. What is it?
A sassy wink.
A sassy wink. There we go. I was thinking snarky wink. Okay.
There's those two.
We can add that one too.
Yeah, that's for different things.
All right. Faye has a question about a popular houseplant. I'd like to know how to cut a corn plant off, grow new roots, and replant in fresh soil. It's now hitting a 9-foot ceiling. Yeah, Dracaena will do that. They call them mass canes if you're keeping score at home in the industry. And what they do, Stacy, is they cut canes into various lengths and root them in pots. And these Dracaena mass canes will grow from it. And the plant is pretty tough and aggressive and eventually can, bump the ceiling.
It can easily get to be 9 feet in time and with good care and if it's happy. Just to be clear, she says corn plant, but we are not talking about the corn that you eat or corn syrup. It is actually a Dracaena, very popular houseplant. And there are different types of Dracaena as well. So usually the one that is considered corn plant has the foliage growing all up it, but then sometimes as it gets older, that foliage will drop. So there's a lot of different forms of Dracaena that you can get. But for the corn plant, you can easily cut off portions of it and root them. Mm-hmm. So what you're going to want to do is don't take too big of a section. If you have too big of a section, that's too much roots or that's too much foliage for it to try to grow roots to compensate for. So, I would say probably, something like maybe 8 to 10 inches long or thereabouts.
We're talking about the green growth at the
green
top
growth,
of the
yes,
plant.
correct. So not the bare canes. Where you have the green growth, I would say aim for 8 to 10 inches, a little bit more is fine. And then peel off the leaves so that you're exposing a white base. You'll see that as soon as you start to peel those leaves off. And then if you want, you can put some rooting hormone on there. You don't have to, but if you happen to have some laying around, put some rooting hormone. Put it in a pot with some nice potting soil that is moist. You might want to put a nice big bag around that to build up some humidity. Just make sure that the foliage doesn't touch the bag. And I would say in a good 6 to 10 weeks, that thing is going to have roots and be on its way to eventually reaching a 9-foot tall plant itself.
Yeah, I've seen people take the procedure that you just outlined and even rooted them in a glass of water. You don't have to do it that way, but you could produce roots that way too. And that's the foliage that's growing, the healthy foliage that's growing in the upper part of the plant. Now, I have seen people root the canes also. That's a lot tougher.
Yeah.
And, from time to time in the garden center industry, we'd see some plants shipped in that where the cane was put into soil and had not rooted yet, and it falls out of the pot. So the method Stacy's outlining is probably the best way for you to go.
And if your plant has multiple, it has a long area of living healthy green foliage, you can do that as many times as you want.
Yes.
So it isn't just the topmost growth that you need to take. You can do multiple as long as it has some green growth. Because again, as Rick said, they're not woody plants, but when you have that kind of corkier, woodier growth, it just doesn't root as easily or as well. And everywhere that you cut it back to, eventually with TLC, will sprout a new corn sprout.
Exactly.
And start growing as well. So if you have a 9-foot tall corn plant, Faye, you have the potential to have many, many more if you so choose.
Share with friends and neighbors.
Indeed. We're going to take a little break, and when we come back, we are thrilled to have a guest from Proven Winners Annuals, so please stay tuned.
Welcome back to the Gardening Simplified Show. Today for branching news and interview with Noah Derohanian. He is the Director of Product Management with Proven Winners, and I think probably just as excited as we are for planting some flowering annuals this spring and for spring to arrive. Noah, thanks for joining us on the Gardening Simplified Show.
Well, thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Noah, I want to get a comment from you, first of all, right off the top, annual of the year. So the chosen annual is Supertunia Mini Vista Yellow Petunia. How do you feel about that?
I'm really excited about that as the annual of the year, primarily because of the benefit that the customer is going to receive. As a Proven Winner product, you're going to get that long blooming, heat tolerant. But the biggest thing I think for me is is not having to deadhead. As a customer, having that product on your bench or even having it in your garden and being able to see those vibrant flowers all season long is important. And not having to do as much maintenance, I think, is a big factor.
Well, I know Stacy's happy. She's getting the color yellow in her landscape this year. She loves yellow.
I do love yellow. And I was saying in the first segment when we were talking about the annuals of the year that yellow petunias seem to be kind of like a new on the scene color for petunias.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be. It's going to make the garden pop for sure. I think it's just going to. I think it's going to bring out a lot of other beautiful colors in the garden as a nice complement.
And it just seems like for years there was, pink, there was white, there was purple, and it didn't really go into kind of more of the hot color range. But I know that you guys have been doing a lot with yellow petunias. Is there some sort of color barrier that's been crossed there, something that allows yellow petunias?
So obviously there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes with Proven Winners and the genetics. And I think the biggest factor of the yellow is the fact that it holds that color. A lot of other petunias on the market that are yellow will dull over time.
No one wants a sad yellow. So I feel that.
It's exciting. Caladium of the year, Heart to Heart Blushing Bride Caladium. What's your feeling on caladiums, Noah?
I think that they are a great centerpiece for containers, but I think what's really key and I think a lot of folks can use is they also make a decent houseplant. They are very adaptable as a houseplant. I think that kind of goes untalked about, but I think it's going to be making a trend here. So something to keep in mind.
So if people want to, so say they buy Heart to Heart caladiums for the outdoors in the spring or summer for, outdoor annuals, and they want to bring them indoors. A lot of people, I think, know that caladiums are sort of a bulb, a corm, like growth. So should they let them go dormant and then replant them, or should they bring them inside and try to continue growing them as a green plant?
I think as a hobbyist, the fun thing to do would try to bring it out of the cold before it went dormant and got it inside, ideally, to keep that color going.
And, if they're still doing great around the holidays, I know that Heart to Heart has been doing a lot of work on caladiums for Christmas. So if you can keep it going at least till then.
Yeah, Christmas caladiums. I mean, it's definitely, it would work well with the poinsettia market, bringing that color inside. Doesn't necessarily have to be a flower, can be foliage as well.
Definitely.
So many new fantastic annuals coming out this year, Noah. I'm excited about Space Age Rex begonias. People love colorful foliage and Space Age Rex begonias. Wow. That's quite a plant.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm very excited about this one. The size of the foliage, the color palette, again, even one that could be brought indoors. It's one of those really nice, large foliage with its purples and some of the greens. There are 3 different varieties of the Space Age. You have Triton, Europa, as well as Black Hole. I mean, they all bring their own individual personality, but all kind of work the same with their vigor and their foliage size.
What a great plant. I've been talking to Kevin Hurd with Proven Winners about Aromagica purple heliotrope. He's really excited about this plant because of the branching, and he says as far as the flowers are concerned, they bury their dead, so it's more of a maintenance-free plant, and who doesn't love the fragrance of a heliotrope? I think there's a lot of people excited about Aromagica, Noah.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with Kevin. I know we've gone on several trips together, Kevin and I, and he's mentioned how excited he is about the heliotropium being one of the newest additions to the Proven Winners line. And he does have an extensive background in genetics, which is really awesome to travel with him. But I definitely agree with him. The aroma, the fact that it does bury the dead flowers, that's a huge win.
And, I think heliotrope is one of those plants that a lot of people don't even know because it was considered such an old-fashioned kind of flower, kind of went out of favor because of the deadheading and just not great plants overall. And a lot of this breeding, I think, brings the potential for this plant to a whole new audience. And, for those of who are wondering what the magic in the Aromagica is, they smell like vanilla. They have this just delightful, beautiful vanilla smell. And of course, heliotrope, the plant, is itself another name for purple. So purple and vanilla, I mean, sign me up.
It also, what's interesting, it'll grows in the grande absolutely beautifully. Containers, window boxes, recipes, monocultures, landscapes. I mean, this plant has it all. So it's a great addition.
If you want to talk about the history and old-fashioned plants, for me, heliotrope, in the heat of summer, I smell a fresh-baked cherry pie.
I can see that, too.
That's
there's
what
like
I
a cherry vanilla kind of fragrance.
Does anybody bake pies and put them on the windowsill in summer anymore? Maybe they do, but that's what I smell.
too many people floating around.
Exactly.
I'll tell you what, I mentioned earlier in the show, Noah, that I was a big fan of Scaevola before it became popular, and now, as opposed to the fan shape or hand shape flowers, you come out with Star Diva. Wow, what a plant.
Yes, so very excited about the Star Diva. I am also a huge Scaevola fan. I think the nice thing for me about Scaevola is when you give it to somebody who may not necessarily be an avid horticulturalist, they can let it dry down a little bit and it pops right back. The Star Diva, I mean, the nice thing about it is it just packs a huge flower punch. It's going to be used separately than the Whirlwind would be used. Whirlwind you're going to find in the baskets. The Star Diva is going to kind of be a standalone, maybe in containers. It definitely doesn't pack as big of a fill as the Whirlwind, so it does have its place in the market. It's nice to have a complementary pair to the Whirlwind in its own right.
You know, I like when I'm designing my containers, which I pretty much do on the spot. It's not like I go to the garden center with a grand plan in mind. It's kind of just grabbing whatever looks cool. You know, a lot of times I've thought, I would love like the color and the form of a Scaevola, but I don't need a trailer. And it's so cool when you have, you know, that same kind of look and that same durability and everything, but in a different habit. It's a great way to kind of do a theme and variation, create some cohesion in the garden without just being overly unnecessarily repetitive.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yes. I like how you put that, for sure.
Yeah, and if you're thinking about growing Scaevola in your yard, if you have a really hot situation or hot sun, boy, this is the plant for you. It really performs. Okay, Kufia. Am I pronouncing that right, first of all?
I think you are.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's see what Noah says. Okay.
So it was Stacy who got me really going on Vermillionaire. I mean, I've dabbled in it before, but Vermillionaire, I love that plant. It was gorgeous in my garden this year. And then you come out with Totally Tempted Kufias, which are procumbens. So I'm thinking the plant being a procumbens, it's more of a trailer, or it's shorter. Tell us about these new kufias that are introduced this year.
Sure. So some people pronounce kufia kufia. I think either way is correct. But the nice thing about this is it just kind of expands our list of heat tolerant annuals for sure. It's floriferous. You're still going to get your pollinators coming in, which is awesome, as well as it's just a little bit more of a refined habit. And so you're not going to, like you said, it's the procumbens. It's not going to be that standing tall. It's going to be much rounder, more mounded, and still packs that flower punch that we love in Kufia for sure.
Now, what I did get samples of this last year, and I grew it. I grew the red one because the only thing I like better than yellow is red. And the color was just stunning. Now it did get pollinator. So not the hummingbirds like Totally Tempted, because it doesn't have those cigar shaped flowers that kind of characterize the Vermillionaire type. But just such a beautiful plant, and the color, it looks great with the Vermillionaire because it still picks up with kind of that saturation that you see with that like little bit of purple. But the color on this plant, I've never grown anything like it. I absolutely adored it.
Yeah, for people keeping score at home, we're talking about Kufia. So it's Cuphea, and then the Totally Tempted Frosted Violets, and then Richly Red. There is also a Vivid Violet and a Totally Tempted Watermelon Wine. I think these plants are going to be popular, Noah.
I agree. I agree.
Now, years ago in the garden center industry, I have memories of selling moss roses. Just multicolored moss roses in trays.
Cell packs, the old cell packs.
The old cell packs, and a lot of people consider them as an old-fashioned annual. But now we've got tangerine, fuchsia, and mango, the Mojave portulacas. These plants, especially for hot, sunny areas, Noah, I'm planning on growing some of these in my landscape this year.
Oh, for sure. And don't just think of it as a landscape plant. The way that they work in hangers, I think, is phenomenal. Growing for some other growers before venturing into Proven Winners, a lot of hangers the 8-inch hangers would be loaded. We had loaded portulaca hangers, and they were just phenomenal, and would fly off the shelf. So don't think of it as just a landscape plant. It does work well as a mono or a mono combo, 2 different colors mixed into a hanging basket.
And, it's very forgiving. So especially for people who want to grow in containers but travel or have really difficult conditions, it's such a great choice because it can really withstand some short-term abuse without really suffering in the flower color at all.
Agreed. And it sets so many new buds that they're always ready to emerge. So if you do lose some flowers, water it. If you come back from a vacation, like you said, a few days later, maybe a week later, you'll have some new flowers emerging.
I love it. Unplugged red salvia and white salvia. Tell us about this plant. There's a great story behind this plant, and I think this is going to be very popular in garden centers this year.
I agree as well. The salvia is a huge staple of our new intros coming out. The flowers, the different colors that we're offering, larger blossoms, greater flower power, just impulse appeal at the retail level. It's gonna be great for all sorts of consumers in the garden.
And there's unplugged red and unplugged white, correct?
That is correct. Yeah, and again, it's going to attract the pollinators, the bees, the butterflies, hummingbirds. But the nice thing is, it is deer resistant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep, they didn't. I had samples of this last year as well, of unplugged red. They didn't touch it, and this thing, it was a blooming machine. Mm-hmm. Like it just would not stop. And the flower clusters, the spikes, they kind of elongate. So the longer you have it, the longer they get. And by the end of the season, it just looks like this wild, kind of like gets back to that more like wild salvia.
Yeah. Wow.
In the best way, like I love that it kind of gets a little, just a little wild, a little rough around the edges. I like that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Noah, I, of course, love the Supertunias, the performance of Supertunias. You have one this year, Bermuda Beach. This is a Supertunia that I want to put in a container on my deck and then pull up my lawn chair with a nice little beverage and sit by it. What a cool color on that plant.
For sure. What kind of beverage do you think you would have?
Oh, come on over. We'll mix something up really good, Noah. Actually, to be honest with you, it would be a cilantro and cucumber martini.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah. So the Supertunia Bermuda Beach, it has been within the Proven Winners realm for a little bit, but this is an improvement. So when we do make improvements or release improvements, they are not big. They're not usually big improvements because we know it's a tried and true crop that our customers absolutely adore. What we're trying to do is just pass on some of the benefits of some maybe newer things that are coming out. So maybe a little bit larger of a flower, maybe the color is going to last a little bit longer. So as far as Bermuda Beach goes, it's a medium coral pink flower, blooms spring to fall with no deadheading. We all love not having to deadhead flowers. And again, it's one of those plants that you could just use window boxes, hanging basket recipes. You could do whatever you want with this plant. It's indestructible. It's a great plant. And
it's a key element of one of Proven Winner's best-selling recipes, is that Bermuda Beach or Bermuda Skies with this and the little blue lobelias in it.
Oh yeah.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, always. You see that everywhere. I know when that first came out, everyone was like, ooh, wow. And, here we are at least 10 years later, and I see it everywhere I go, every single season. People love that combination.
It's gorgeous. Noah, before we let you go, and we're talking to Noah Derohanian. He is the Director of Product Management with Proven Winners. And Noah, I want to ask you real quickly, because when I'm in the garden center, I see people going crazy over Angelonia. Angel face. Love that plant. And you have some improved varieties this year.
That is correct. It's going to be a very heat resistant variety. It thrives in the heat. So think of it as a plant that just thrives in the heat. So you get into a nice warm area, it's just going to perform like crazy for you. Just make sure you give it the right amount of water, but in a nice warm area, and they're going to explode.
Oh, fantastic. Noah, as Director of Product Management with Proven Winners, you're probably not allowed to have a favorite plant. Is that correct? Or do you have a favorite?
I do have. I was, it's funny before I hopped on this call, I was wondering if that question was going to come up, and I do have a favorite plant, and I don't know if it's going to bode well with my colleagues, but I think that the double up begonia for me is one of my favorite annuals. Really, growing it is such an easy grow. You can pot it and forget it, and it just does its thing. It's a very easy product, and I just absolutely adore that plant.
I love that. And, I see a real resurgence in begonias too. It's a plant that can handle some dry shade. People love begonias, and to have these varieties of begonias available today certainly is a kick in the plant, so to speak, when we get out there and start planting, Noah.
Just so everyone knows, the Rexes are let's just call it a foreshadow. I want to say that the Rexes are just a nice starting point. There's so many beautiful begonias out there for their foliage. Just keep an eye out from Proven Winners, and we hope we bring you some really awesome stuff.
Fantastic. Noah, thank you so much for joining us on the Gardening Simplified Show. A pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for everything you do for Proven Winners and for the general public. Boy, we've got some great plants to look forward to this year.
Yes, thank you for having me, and I love sharing all the information.
All right. Thanks, Noah.
Well, gee, I said at the end of segment 1 that I was super excited for garden center shopping season. Now I'm even more excited, and it's still a couple months away. So I'm going to have to figure out something else to do with all of that plant energy.
I'm ready to go.
Put it into seed shopping or something like that. So thanks so much to Noah for sharing all of that great information about the new Proven Winners annuals for 2025. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adriana. And thanks so much to all of you for listening, watching, and listening to us on podcasts. We really appreciate it and hope you have a wonderful week ahead.